grassroots movement for this foundational human right. Please join me in a round of applause for the 56th Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Mike Johnson.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Well, it's my great honor to be with you this morning. I've really looked forward to this, and I'm grateful for all that you all do. I want to thank Ambassador Brownback for that introduction, very kind introduction. I want to thank Katrina Lantos-Sweat for co-chairing this amazing summit, and all of you. Ambassador Hussein and Ambassador Rehak, and my colleagues in the House, Representatives Young Kim and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. I want to thank them for all that they're doing, that everyone's doing to promote the free exercise of religion or belief. This is truly one of the most diverse and most important meetings that happens in Washington, and I mean that sincerely. As you have heard, I devoted most of my adult life and my career to the defense of religious freedom. I believe it's that important. And as a former religious liberty litigator, it's an honor to join you all as we speak against religious persecution around the globe. While it may not be popular in today's increasingly secular world, of course, America was founded on the ideal of religious freedom and the belief that every single person has inalienable rights. Since our founding, of course, America has been the greatest proponent for religious freedom around the world because we were founded on that ideal. Our heritage on this issue is visible throughout Washington, D.C. You can take a walk down to the Jefferson Memorial here, and I'm sure many of you have, and you can read what Thomas Jefferson wrote in 1777 to establish religious freedom in Virginia. It says there on the wall, it's inscribed on the wall, "No man shall be compelled to frequent or support religious worship or ministry, or shall otherwise suffer on account of his religious opinions or belief." Or you can walk down to the National Archives, of course, and read the first line of our Bill of Rights. We like to say around here that religious liberty is quite literally our first freedom. It's listed first in the Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. These ideals come from the self-evident truth that men and women are created by God and that it is God, not the government, who gives us our rights. The great British philosopher G.K. Chesterton said one time, "America is the only nation in the world that is founded upon a creed." And he said it's listed with almost theological lucidity in the Declaration of Independence. Our nation's birth certificate states that very clearly. And as created beings, our relationship to and our beliefs about God cannot be coerced by the state. We believe that God makes all men in his image, and the founders believe that. The founders of our nation did, and that's why they wrote the Declaration as they did. They proclaimed that it was a self-evident truth, something that's obvious, that our rights don't derive from government, they derive from God. And because we're made in God's image, the belief was that every single person has inestimable dignity and value. And your value is not related in any way to the color of your skin or what country you live in or how intelligent you are. Your value is inherent because it is given to you by your Creator. And the state doesn't have the authority or the capacity to judge or transform the soul. Anytime it tries to take that authority, it attempts to do what only God can, and it moves beyond its sphere of jurisdiction and it becomes tyrannical. When religious freedom is taken away from a people, political freedom soon follows. We know that that is the lesson of history. James Madison once said, "It is conscience that is the most sacred of all property." So if governments shouldn't steal your property, then they shouldn't steal your conscience, and they shouldn't prohibit you from acting upon it. That's the long-held view in America, and it's the view I spent decades in fighting for in the courts, and it's the view that has been reaffirmed, thankfully, time and time again by our Supreme Court here in the United States. But sadly, this view of religious freedom is not the dominant view around the world, as you know, and North Korea's Kim Jong-un, for example, continues to exercise a dark influence and deny all freedoms to his people, especially religious freedom. The regime in Myanmar continues to engage in genocidal attacks against the Rohingya Muslims. In Nigeria, Christians and minority Muslims are attacked and killed by mobs and terrorists. Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua and Miguel Diaz-Canel in Cuba hunt down and imprison Catholic priests and Baptist pastors who simply preach the gospel and speak out against the regime. Tibetan Buddhists and Falun Gong practitioners are placed in forced labor camps, and they have their organs harvested by the Chinese Communist Party. And in the Uyghur Autonomous Region, Uyghur Muslims are suffering under Chinese Communist Party's genocidal campaign of forced sterilization, forced detention, and re-education. Millions of Uyghurs have been detained in these camps where they're kept in cramped cells and they're tortured and brainwashed. We all know this. Uyghur women are subject to heinous violence I won't bear to repeat this morning. And all these countries, some of the most repressive in the world, also have the least to offer their citizens in terms of economic prosperity and social mobility, and that's no surprise. Because if you're going to restrict and torment people for their religious beliefs, it's going to be a tyrannical regime. Economic prosperity grows when the people are allowed to follow their faith. Freedom flourishes where freedom is allowed. And at this moment, the U.S. has an opportunity and an obligation to prevent genocide and punish those who commit it. As China, yes. As China makes its forced labor efforts harder to detect, we call on the Biden administration to fully enforce the letter and the spirit of the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. Yes, this should not be a partisan issue. We should all be united on this. It's who we are as Americans. And we must use all of our resources to prevent American involvement in Uyghur genocide, obviously. Of course, our commitment to preventing genocide dates back to the aftermath of the Holocaust. And sadly, the same anti-Semitism that led to the Holocaust is now being spread through new tools and once again rearing its ugly head. Since Hamas slaughtered thousands of Israeli citizens on October 7th, we've seen a frightening and seemingly coordinated rise of anti-Semitism, including here on our own shores, and it has been alarming. Now is the time, just a few days after Holocaust Remembrance Day, to stand with our Jewish brothers and sisters and recommit to the promise we made decades ago, never again. That's right. I want to leave you with this thought this morning, that this gathering knows better than anyone that if we stand together, we can send a clear message to those who think religious freedom is a Western or American value. It was Gus Dur, the former Prime Minister of Indonesia, the world's largest Muslim country, by the way, who said this: "Those who try to sanction or limit religious freedom not only halt the developmental process of religious understanding, but conflate the sanctioning authorities' limited grasp of the truth and ultimate truth itself." I couldn't have said that better myself. We know that freedom of religion or belief is a universal value. It's given to people everywhere. Again, it's given to us by our Creator. That's our belief. And so we gather at this summit under one banner saying that religious freedom truly is for all the people. And we declare the universal, self-evident truth that our inalienable rights, especially the right to religious freedom, come from God and not the government. Thank you all for what you're doing. Let me be a partner in it. I'm grateful. God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am Nguyễn Bắc Truyển, a Hòa Hảo Buddhist and a former religious prisoner of conscience from Vietnam. I was imprisoned twice simply for advocating for basic human rights and religious freedom in Vietnam. My wife, Bùi Thị Kim Phượng, was invited to the International Religious Freedom Summit many times, but she was stopped at the airport by the Vietnamese government in 2019 and banned from traveling since then. Thanks to the global campaign for religious prisoners of conscience, I was released in September 2023, after having been unjustly imprisoned for 6 years from Germany. We would like to express our sincere gratitude towards Member of Congress, the U.S. Commission of International Religious Freedom, the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, the State Department on organization and advocates who have sponsored and advocated for us for more than 6 years. I would like to take this opportunity to highlight the importance of the international advocacy for the protection of religious prisoners. Even if the prisoners are not released immediately, your advocacy surely has an impact in improving prison conditions. Under the pressure of the international community, prison officials had to implement some positive change after my petition to improve prison conditions. Even though the global campaign cannot include every prisoner, but when you select some specific cases and persistently advocate for those and put pressure on the violating government, that we have protect the rights and dignity of many other prisoners. With the belief in the right to freedom of religion for everyone, everywhere, I would like to request all of you to stand in solidarity with religious prisoners, and together let us advance freedom of religion or belief around the world, including in Vietnam. Thank you very much.
Please welcome Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
It is an honor to be here at the 2024 International Religious Freedom Summit and to be one of the honorary co-chairs for the summit. I'm proud to be alongside allies in the fight for religious freedom and equal rights, including Anila Ali, who has raised her voice as a Muslim woman to counter hate against Jews and uplift women across faiths, and Rabbi Diana Gerson, who has used her platform to counter and prevent family and partner violence and child exploitation. I'm honored to have the chance to contribute to this critical discourse. We need concrete action to overcome attacks on the most fundamental of human rights, the right to one's conscience and beliefs. Throughout this summit, experts have depicted the horrific human and social costs of religious repression around the world. 80% of people alive today, over 6 billion, live under restrictions on their ability to practice or express their faith. In my time in Congress, I've seen immense progress in our government's efforts to hold repressive regimes accountable and provide justice for the downtrodden, especially under President Joe Biden's leadership. Religious freedom concerns are rightfully placed at the center of our human rights policy through the dedication of commissioners, professional staff, and envoys, including Ambassadors Deborah Lipstadt and Rashad Hussain. As a member of the Appropriations Committee, I've prioritized support for robust funding for U.S. and international efforts to promote the freedom to believe or not to believe and to combat the persecution of religious minorities. In my own district in Broward County, Florida, I'm proud to represent a vibrant diaspora community that informs my efforts through their firsthand experience with persecution, from Nicaraguan Catholics to Pakistani Ahmadi Muslims to Afro-Cuban Paleros. I've heard truly horrific stories from my neighbors in South Florida, along with genuine gratitude for the freedoms that we far too often take for granted. Above all, I've been inspired by new Americans who leverage this experience through the lens of their own faith to advocate fiercely on behalf of those back home who are silenced due to oppression and prejudice. As a Jewish American, this mission is personal for me. My own family arrived in the U.S. as migrants fleeing persecution and pogroms in Eastern Europe, motivated by the universal desire for freedom and a better life. Because of their strength and determination, I grew up in a place where I can speak my mind and be whatever I want to be in line with my beliefs and my Jewish values. These values, like Tikkun Olam, our responsibility to help repair the world, lie at the heart of my Jewish identity. This tenet, to leave the world better than you found it, to help those who cannot help themselves, and to contribute to the broader community, motivated me to pursue public service and drives my work every day. I'm grateful that I was brought up in an environment that cherished education, understanding, and acceptance, not just tolerance, while emphasizing each individual's obligation to stand up against all forms of bigotry and hate. That's why it's so horrifying to see the resurgence of anti-Semitism around the world, and particularly here in the US, and I appreciate Speaker Johnson's acknowledgement of that crisis and his commitment to work together to fight it. Amid a 360% increase in already record-high incidents, I've spoken to college students who share that they are afraid to wear a kippah or post a mezuzah on their door. Even as our government mobilizes on a bipartisan basis to counter anti-Semitism, those who live in fear of discrimination can never be truly free to express their faith and heritage. While the United States can and should serve always as an emblem of freedom of conscience, threats are always lurking. Although my Jewish heritage shapes my values, I firmly believe in the separation of church and state, especially here in the US. Sadly, many have sought to impose their beliefs on others or to abuse religious freedoms to justify oppression or prejudice against religious minorities and other marginalized groups, including LGBTQI+ individuals. Religion must not be used as a cudgel to discriminate against others. It is essential that we as leaders do everything in our power to remove the roadblocks that prevent Americans from living with dignity and respect. I often say that I made Tikkun Olam a career choice, but far too many are denied the ability to make that choice to live out their values. This highlights a point that is critical to our discussion of the impact of challenges to religious freedom. It goes far beyond the visible symptoms, the pain and suffering that result from repression, compulsion, and discrimination. There's an opportunity cost to all societies who deny free expression and thought, or who fail to act in the face of threats. They lose out. We all lose out on the contributions that religious minorities and other persecuted groups would make if they have the liberty to live out their lives, to live out their values, to attack life with the passion and drive that can only manifest in a free and open environment. Imagine how rich and healthy our world could be if hundreds of millions of victims of persecution had the ability to live their lives freely. Here at home, we are a stronger society because of the tapestry that is America. Cultural and diverse beliefs have advantaged all of us in our everyday lives. At this critical time, our world is certainly in need of healing. But that should galvanize all of us to redouble our efforts to unite and advance the cause of international religious freedom and acceptance of others. I hope to have your help in doing so. I am confident that that is the case. After all, refusing to back down from challenges that seem insurmountable is the ultimate expression of faith. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the moderator for Challenges in India for Non-Majority Faiths, President and CEO, Global Christian Relief, David Curry, with panelists, co-founder NSAF, Sukhman Dami, Senior Editor, The Wire, Arfa Khanum, founder, Northeast India Women Initiative for Peace, Beena Nepran, and Archdiocese of Madras Mylapore, Father Christu Rajan.
Thank you, everyone. It's an honor to be here with these wonderful people. Please have a seat. We're going to jump right into the conversation. Global Christian Relief has a violence index that ranks India, surprisingly, as one of the most violent areas for religious minorities. And we want to talk about that environment that we see rising, that rising disquiet in such a beautiful country, such a great culture. And I want to start with Arfa Khanum. We're so grateful for you. You're the senior editor at The Wire. Give us an overview of what you see are the challenges for non-majority faiths in India.
First of all, thank you very much for having this session focused on India. Well, I was listening to a few panelists yesterday, and it was heartwarming for me to hear that religion could also be part of the solution, not just problem. I thought we've been practicing this in India for centuries, not just independent India, and we were some kind of a model state for the world, especially for the Western world, that how despite many religious, caste, religion, linguistic differences, it worked out fine for us. So we became a model state, but this was only until the state started to adopt a religion for itself.
Yes.
So our constitution literally says that we are a secular liberal constitution, which means the state does not have a religion. But in the past 10 years, in one decade, we've seen that now, and interestingly, we are talking about religious freedom in India when just 24 hours ago, India observed the day of assassination for the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi. And the ideology that is responsible for the assassination of Mahatma and the people, the organization, they are ruling India right now. So I feel this is the moment of triumph for Hindu majoritarianism in India. And I think since the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi in 1948, we have now the gravest threat to secularism, to religious freedom in India. I see, if quickly I can just go forward, there are three major markers, I feel, which are responsible for the state of affairs in India right now, three major markers for religious freedom. One is the introduction of a law called Citizenship Amendment Act, which fast-tracks applications from three neighboring countries where the minorities are persecuted, except Muslims. So this goes against the secular spirit of the Constitution. Second is to withdraw the status of special status from the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and also to demote it now and made it union territory, which means directly controlled by the Delhi, and taking away autonomy from relative autonomy from the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And remind you that this is the only Muslim majority state in India. And number three is now the opening of the Ram temple. Of course, I fully understand that this was, the court allowed it. This temple is now being built on the same spot where there is a medieval mosque which stood for 500 years.
That's right.
And which was brought down by party workers, supporters of Mr. Modi in 1992. So now he's become now part of this whole worship. He became the host of this whole puja. And he did not look like a leader of 1.4 billion people. Rather, I would say, a Hindu king. So I would say these three things, three important markers, they define what India looks like right now. And this was not possible without demoting Muslims to the status of second-class citizenship.
Right. So this is a big shift. It's a cultural shift, and I think many in the West are struggling to catch up. Everybody here represents a different region. You have people from the South and North. Bina, you come from the Northeast. And you see what's happening with indigenous people who have indigenous faiths. Talk a little bit about what you've observed.
Yes. First of all, I want to pay my respects to our esteemed panelists, our esteemed chair, and to 1,200 people who have registered, and those watching online in my Manipuri language, Mayam Mutaram no Okchari. I pay my obeisance to each and every one of you here. I also acknowledge the Natochkank and the Piscataway people on whose land we stand. I pay my respects to elders, past and present, to be able to do this work. And sincere thanks to the Lantos Foundation and IRF for this. Having said this, absolutely, my appeal today to each one of you here is do not see India in the binary. Black and white, Muslim, Hindus, Christians. India is a land of 1.3 billion people. Speaking over more than hundreds of languages. And it is one of the most multicultural, diverse part of our country. But most of the statements that you see outside is about two religions. So I come from the indigenous faith. I was born in the indigenous family in Manipur. All my schooling was in a Christian Catholic convent school, Little Flower School. I read the Quran. I networked with the Baha'is. Worship in the Quaker home. I was able to find solace in churches when I came here, as well as the libraries of America, which I call living rooms. So to be very honest, having come from a diverse background, to see what is happening in terms of international religious freedom is something that we got to fight. Now, having said this, India has almost 80% Hindus, almost 14% Muslims, 6% Christians, Sikhs, Jains. But we also have one group, which is called other religion and persuasion, which I doubt many of us know about it. So in which the faith that my parents brought me up, Sanamahi, my family suffered religious persecution. In the 19th century, my grandfather was banished for 10 years for resisting a faith and standing by our indigenous faith in Manipur. I have seen how my own family have suffered through this. So having said this, I would like to share in terms of where I come from. I would like, David, if you allow me, to have a moment's silence for over 200 people in Manipur who have been killed in an attack for the last 9 months, and 20,000 people who have been killed and 1,526 massacred in my home state in the last 20 to 30 years.
Okay, let's do that right now. Let's take a moment, a silence in honor of those who have been injured, killed, attacked in Manipur.
Thank you.
Amen. Thank you.
I thank you.
Bina, thank you so much for highlighting something that we need to remember, which is this is about freedom of religious expression for everyone, everywhere, not just the largest groups or the ones that can get the attention. This is terribly important. The issue of justice, I want to ask you this, Sukhman, as the co-founder of NSOF, that's really about justice. The word literally means justice. What do you see in these minority, or however you want to turn that phrase around, the not majority faiths, regarding the justice and these attacks and what's happening to respond to them?
Firstly, thank you for organizing this timely and important conversation. It's my privilege to be on this panel with such other courageous voices, and thank you for your question. Unfortunately, India has become a country where persecution based on faith is a consistent feature. And we all know when this persecution de facto becomes endorsed by the state, it can often arise to much more serious crimes, such as crimes against humanity. And that has very much been the focus of my work leading the organization INSAF, where we've documented well over 5,000 incidents of extrajudicial executions and enforced disappearances of Sikhs and other minorities, predominantly in the state of Punjab, which is the context of my work. We've also seen an entrenched culture of impunity arise over the decades for these atrocity crimes. Because of this culture of impunity, we see a continuing replication of persecution and gross human rights violations, not only in Kashmir, but in other places that are controlled by India, and security forces have gone on to commit widespread and systematic atrocities in places like Kashmir, in the Northeast, and other parts of India. We've endeavored to document these atrocities and hold officials accountable. However, because of the impunity, because of the culture of impunity, we've actually seen not only further atrocities in India, but also an expansion of India's targeting of minorities outside of its borders.
That's right. So, I mean, just imagine that you're so confident that you're not going to be prosecuted, that many of them are posting the attacks on social media themselves. And now, as you mentioned, there's this transnational aggression, which is happening outside the borders. And we have some documented proof about this. Talk about those cases.
Well, recently, just a few months ago, a secret memo that originated from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, signed by the secretary, outlined the individuals and organizations that India was targeting as part of a global assassinations program. And this wasn't a mere words written on paper. We now know that Sikhs have been assassinated in Pakistan, in Canada. There's been a suspicious death in the United Kingdom. We know that there's also been an assassination plot targeting Sikhs in the United States that has been uncovered. And there's a prosecution presently underway in New York. We also know that the German prosecutors in the last couple of years have been prosecuting Indian agents for spying on Sikh diaspora and Kashmiri communities. And so India has in fact been emboldened by the fact that it has been able to get away with atrocity crimes in India and has now taken those same practices of targeted killings and has felt that it has a license to kill with impunity internationally.
Yeah, for our relationship with Western institutions and India to be strong, it has to be based on shared values, understanding of human rights, and this is a very challenging idea. I want to, Father Rajan, I want to ask you about this, some of what you're doing in the South to build community amongst faiths, because there has to be a process where we know each other, give each other the benefit of the doubt, build a relationship. Talk a little bit about that, and also what you see is the targeting of minority faiths in your region.
Thanks, David. A very good morning to all my brothers and sisters here. And it's a big honor to be part of this IRF Summit. I thank all those who have welcomed me here. Well, I come from South India, a relatively peaceful region, not like Northeast or Northern India. But the thing is that we see, I am a Roman Catholic priest as well as a human rights lawyer. So for last almost 10 years, we continuously see some attack on the Indian Constitution. So we see that it's a war between two ideologies. One guaranteed by the Indian Constitution, which gives justice for all, promoting fraternity, equality, and liberty. Another ideology which doesn't believe in equality. And they believe in a caste system which doesn't promote liberty or fraternity. So the fight is going on for quite some time. And now the present situation is too scary that we need to stand up to protect the noble values in the Constitution. They are, like Dr. Ambedkar, a famous man of that constitutional expert, has guaranteed us these fundamental rights after so many years of slavery. And now the minorities enjoyed so far, at least last 70 years, because India remains a secular country. But that is now a jeopardy. It's a very big question mark. And they say that, my friends from the other side, they say that we have already formed a new constitution. And if that comes to effect, then there won't be voting rights for Christians, Muslims, or other minority communities. So such kind of rumors everywhere in the society, so people are forced to live in fear. So there is a clear formula for them. Like first they create some sort of rumors, and then they come with intimidation, and then physical attacks. So even in South India, where we see that relatively a calm area, where at least within 2-3 months, more than 100 cases are filed because they disturb the prayer services conducted in a peaceful manner. And the physical attacks are less than Northern India, but still, the situation seems to be getting worse day by day.
Yeah. When you get these reconciliation, in that environment, when you get the reconciliation groups together, what is the power of that?
Yes, so in South, like I represent the Tamil Nadu state, where we have almost 80 million people, and the Roman Catholic Church has taken a lead to spread the constitutional values throughout not only the church, but also to the society. And I am a member of Social Harmony Federation, where we try to bring Muslims, Hindus, Christians, and even our friends, non-believers, together, and we have formed the Social Harmony Federation. And also a pioneer in the Justice and Peace wing of the Tamil Nadu Bishops' Council, that we are able to promote this social harmony through various courses of trainings and also forming unity groups among these neglected masses. So far, they had no say in the governments or anything. So we try to promote this amity and unity, which is the fundamental right guaranteed in the Constitution. So the diocese, all the dioceses have taken a lead in promoting this common good. That's what our Pope has given very clearly through the Fratelli Tutti. The message he says that you have to come together, walk together, journey together, in spite of differences between caste, color, religion, language, sex,
Yes.
So despite all these things, you see the common good in the society, and it is high time to stand up, because I would like to say a quote from my Tamil language, where it says that why I value IRF, because God, after looking at his people, what they are doing in the country, that he says, I have given them stones to build bridges. With that stones, they are building walls to separate each other.
Yes.
Now it is high time to demolish those walls and build bridges. So that's what we are doing.
In the moments remaining, maybe we'll just ask each of you. I'll start with you, Bina. Yes. What is being done, if anything, to build bridges in the Northeast that you know about?
Absolutely, David. I thought coming from Father would be quite natural just to speak. Since 2010, we started the Northeast India Women Initiative for Peace. The Northeast is a very geostrategic area, if some of you have been there or not. It's land to 45 million people, we are just below China, next to Myanmar, sharing borders with 5 countries, Bhutan, Nepal, Burma, Bangladesh, China. We only share what is called 11 miles with India, called Chicken Necks Corridor. So this is a home to 272 beautiful ethnic groups, speaking over 400 languages, which should be a National Geographer's paradise. So if you don't know this region, if you have enjoyed British breakfast tea, it didn't come from England, it came from my region. The first oil of India was dug there. Now, the point is, this diversity, 45 million people's history is not in the textbooks of our country. First, include the history of diverse people in our country to be able to understand each other.
Yes.
That people in the Northeast, even in Manipur, we do not understand each other because our histories have been blanked out from the consciousness of the world's largest democracy. We want that to happen. Secondly, the women of all the ethnic groups in the Northeast and Indo-Burma border need to unite to work to ensure the peace and the justice that is deserved. There are 17 peace talks in India's Northeast, and not a single woman is in it. You exclude 50% of the population, then how can we get peace in India's Northeast? How can we get peace in Manipur? Right now, David, my final point. Right now, everything is weaponized. Our identity is weaponized. Our religion is weaponized. Our homes are weaponized. Our politics is weaponized. How can we build a world, a society with guns? We have to do, nation building has to be done with a lot of love. If you are parents,
I'm going to interrupt you there because I want to make sure but your points are well taken. Yeah. What do you see about on this idea of, are people coming together to build bridges, or are we still segmented?
I appreciate what Bina is saying, but the ugly reality of the day is that the government of India is siding with majority religion in Manipur, and the loss of lives that we've seen, more than 200 people getting killed, and there's so many people who are homeless now. It's because the government of India is siding with the majority religion. So they have created enemies. Yes. The major enemy right now and the anti-national people are the Muslims of India, but even Christians, I would say, they come on number 2. So I think we really need to underline this, and it's also a moment of anxiety and fear for someone like me, that we have elections now in just next few days. And if it's Mr. Modi comes back and his party comes back to power, I feel 200 million people, the way they have lived in a state of anxiety is only growing. Many of the things that we are seeing right now, the state persecution, which people, like to call as communal violence. It's not communal violence. Let's call it what it is. It is state persecution of Indian Muslims and sometimes of Christians also. But right now, it is the Indian Muslims who are the clear-cut enemy. I feel he might try to formalize this whole, the status of second-class citizenship to Indian Muslims, and he might try to change constitution in fundamental ways. It'll be difficult for us and for the global community to recognize that it is the same country of Gandhi and Nehru and the country of their dreams. So I feel it's really important to underline how the government is colliding with the majority religion, whether it is in the mainland or it is in the northeast in Manipur.
Well, I think that's going to have to be the last word. Would you please thank our panel here today for their feedback? So appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
A warm welcome for our next panel. Women in IRF Leading the Way moderator, co-founder Forbes Women's Alliance, Lou Anne Sabatier, and panelists, former U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Ambassador Susan Johnson Cook, Director of Outreach, Multi-Faith Neighbors Network, Huranessa Faria, President, Leah Foundation, Gloria Puldu, and Founder and Executive Director, Women Peace Network, Wei Wei Nu.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my distinct honor to share the stage this morning with these remarkable women leaders. I hope, I know, that today's exchange will be filled with some sobering observations, years of wisdom from working in the field, and hopefully some encouragement for all of us. While there are names and cases you may be familiar with, there are tens of thousands of unnamed women and girls on the front lines of advancing religious freedom in communities all around the world. They have endured religious freedom violations, egregious abuses, made worse simply for one reason: because they are women. They are victims of discrimination, lack of access to education, to work, to basic human needs, forced marriage, religious conversion, rape, torture, sterilization, mutilation, persecution, prison, and death. In recent years, many of you in this audience and around the world, very respected organizations and groups, you've worked to better understand the interaction of gender and religious freedom and persecution. Among those seeking to identify and really remove some of the obstacles and roadblocks to these issues are United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, United States Institute of Peace, Open Doors International, Aid to the Church in Need, Stephanos Alliance. You know the names. Did you know they have spent decades researching gender and religious persecution with a focus on women? Let me be very clear. The collective research has found when faced with religious persecution, women and girls experience disproportionate and compound anguish. First, for religion and belief, but then, due to gender inequality. Political, economic stressors, cultural norms wrapped in the pretext of religion, and that remains hushed, hidden from view. It's not talked about in the community. So if you say, I don't know about it, that's why. They're not talking about it. We've researched it, but they're not talking about it. Moreover, the infringements are rarely recognized within the context of religious persecution. So even as they exacerbate an already desperate situation and further marginalize this community of women. In 2023, Forbes Women's Alliance added to the body of work. We conducted a global study, multi-faith, 22 countries, 13 religions. And one of the most important things we learned, structural change is the necessary accelerator for addressing this issue. It requires you, and you, and you, the external catalyst. It is not within the agency of the unempowered to have the resources to get out of this or create a space. And that's what we're discussing this morning. Ambassador Johnson-Cook, you have a legacy of fostering collaboration. In your experience, why is it vital that we engage with leaders, faith leaders, government leaders, civil society on this issue?
Well, thank you for asking the question. I want to thank Katrina Lantos-Sweat and Ambassador Brownback for having us today. It's important because we are the voice for the voiceless. And unless someone speaks up, you started out saying there are tens of thousands who are experiencing torture and sexism and all kinds of torture and egregious acts of violence. And so there's some of us who are able to be at the table. And leaders have followers, but leaders have access. And that's what's important for structural, systemic change, to be the voice, to sit at the table. Most of my meetings as a diplomat, as in the role of ambassador, at the end of the meeting, there were always women around the table, that second round of tables, and they would ask me to please speak for them. Many were in countries where if they raised their voices, they would have repercussions. And so I took their cards, and guess what? I spoke up for them. And we created the Female Faces of Faith. We created the Women's Religious Freedom Roundtable. And those are still things that are happening today in the institutions. And unless we introduce them, they'll never be introduced. So we must be the voice. We must speak up. We must move, make the moves, and make our marks so the women will be represented and protected. So we are the voice.
Anyone else on the panel want to address the importance of engaging with leaders?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having us today here. Over the past 10, 12 years, I have actually engaged with the leaders in government, especially with the U.S. Sorry. Hello. Yes. Including the IRF ambassadors and use of commissions and different bodies in the U.S. government and the Capitol Hill. What I notice is that when there is higher or meaningful engagement with the community members, representative, and the leaders, and we see a more victim-centered approach to the policy responses and effectiveness of the policy. Sorry, this is. Hello? I think it's not working.
There you go.
Okay, thanks. So you know, we can see more victim-centered approach and effectiveness of the development of the policies and implementations of the policy. So I would say it is incredibly important that leaders engage with the community representatives and community members.
I'd also like to add, and I think this has come out from USAID recently, and yesterday in a lot of the talks, faith leaders have the trust. Mm-hmm. So you can talk about government leaders, but let's not forget the faith leaders. In the communities, they're the glue. They see the holistic view. Hernessa, what have you experienced personally and professionally at Multi-Faith Neighbors Network that helped you shape your views on the importance of education?
Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. Thank you so much, Luann, for having this panel and having me on stage with these amazing women. I came to the United States as a 5-year-old child refugee from Afghanistan during the early 80s when Reagan was president. And my father really was so proud of being able to come here and thought that President Reagan was his BFF and made me translate for him every time he would come on TV. And you know, having those struggles growing up in Queens, New York City, and then 9/11 happened, I was put in a totally different scheme of life. I had the NYPD, FBI anti-terrorist task force come to my house. I've been called all sorts of names because I'm visibly Muslim. And I didn't want that to happen to anybody else. So when I came into working in the multi-faith peace building world at Multi-Faith Neighbors Network, I became a student also of Imam Majid. I've been his student for many years now. And working in this organization allowed me to advocate for others. We started the Inspire group at Multi-Faith Neighbors Network, which is an intentional program we put together to making sure that women are part of our retreats that we do with clerics here in the United States and overseas as well. As you know, women are more than half the population. If they're not at the table, something is wrong. So we are intentional about making sure that our voices are heard, and we are going forward with that. Our first overseas trip that we had retreat with the women's was in Sudan about 6 weeks before the war started. And I will tell you that the Christian women, the Muslim women were on their A game. They rocked that retreat so nicely that sometimes I think, I'm like, what were the men doing? And they have programs together. They've built a coalition. Even now during the war there, they're advocating for each other. They're working together. And it was so impactful for me to see women come together. And that's what makes me do the work that I do. That's what drives me, to see religious freedom on the ground, on the lives of people that we work with, to see that they're being impacted by what we're doing. And one lady came in the first day. She was Christian. She wore the same outfit as everybody else, so I couldn't tell that she was Christian because they kind of, put the sari scarf over their head. And the next day, because she felt so comfortable, she came with her cleric collar. And I was like, you go, girl, that's the moment that, what we strive for when we see women being able to advocate and show who they are without fearing that they're going to be persecuted. Because I've been through it myself. I don't want other women to be going through that as well. So this work is really important for me. And then we also have training that I'm a part of. I've been training women, Catholic nuns, Muslim women worldwide on public speaking, not because they're going to go up on stage and give the speech of their lifetime, but they're going to have the skills and tools that they need to advocate for themselves in the communities that they live in. Whether they're dealing with people from another faith that are in leadership or their own faith, women and men that I train are going to be able to advocate for themselves. And then I train women and men also in leadership and multicultural norms and multi-faith norms as well, so that they're able to work with one another, not only during the time of peace, but when conflict arises. What are the skills that are needed in order for them to be able to work with one another? And that's been a huge highlight of the work that I do, because I'm actually impacting things on the ground. When we say religious freedom, if we're constantly talking, we're not doing anything on the ground, it doesn't mean anything. And then I also put together a program for my menstrual cup project at Multi-Faith Neighbors Network to have accessibility to dignity for women. Majority of girls in Africa rely on really unpleasant scenes that they have to engage in order to get menstrual cups, menstrual products at their access, and I don't think that's okay. Majority of women here in the United States do not go to school or do not go to work for 3 to 5 days because they cannot get access to menstrual products. And that is part of the work that we have to do. So my project, and I'm so grateful to the Adams Center for funding my first project that's gonna happen here in Northern Virginia and Loudoun County in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we're very organized because we have very little time. So we have leadership, track with me, leadership, education. Now, let's go to the third pillar, which is Wei Wei. Former political prisoner, lawyer, human rights advocate. Share how you're using the legal and procedural framework, the systems and mechanisms and institutions to fight for accountability and justice.
Thank you very much. This is a fantastic question indeed. And in the culture of impunity, it's essential for us to prevent protect women from the violations of FORB. Just to add to what Haranisa was saying, the divisive narrative and the culture of impunity is something that drives escalations of this FORB, and sometimes it can lead to the atrocity crimes, such as in the case of Burma genocide. And when it's come to the utilizations of the legal instruments and institutions, especially international laws and norms and institutions, it's become detrimental or imperative for us to be able to bring justice and accountability, especially in the situations where the state, the country has rendered the legal system entirely, and when there is no rule of law. In Burma right now, the military has been blazingly violating freedom of FORB and launching airstrikes against the Christian churches, detaining Christian leaders, and intensifying genocidal policies and attacks against the Rohingya populations. Even before the coup, the legal systems that we had, the constitutions, does not provide a framework for preventions of FORB. Therefore, it was imperative for us to utilize the international law to bring about justice and accountability. And my organization's Women's Peace Network have been tirelessly working to utilize existing international legal norms and instruments, engaging with the UN special procedures, advocating at the UN Human Rights Council, General Assembly, and Security Council, and so on, to develop or establish international justice processes in the case for the genocide that military has committed. We have also, at the end of the day, these international laws and instruments only work when the governments have political will and the governments take action. So it is also for us important to galvanize the political will of the states and governments. So we engage with the U.S. government. We push for the passings of the laws on Burma and determinations of the atrocities what happened with the Rohingya as genocide. So we basically have to be strategic and use existing framework when there is no hope internally, domestically. You need to utilize international instruments and grab every opportunities and hope and framework that are available, and keep faith and continue to work for the justice and accountability.
Thank you, Wei Wei. And then Gloria. As an educator, an activist, and founder of Leah Foundation, how are you transforming fear and denial into hope and action through grassroots campaigns and advocacy for women and girls in Nigeria?
Thank you very much for this very important question, Lou. And I want to appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak on behalf of the Nigerian girls and women. You know, it's a huge privilege to know that there's true fear because of what is happening. But permit me to use a scripture in the Bible that says in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7, "For God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and sound mind." And for me, this promise, I literally transform it into hope, because the fear is not there. I have to bring it into hope. And that sound mind is to make sure that we bring action into what we are doing. And so for me, the Leah Foundation was created in honor of, the great faith of Leah Sharibu, who refused to renounce her Christian faith. And so we use that organization to advocate for young girls who have been denied their rights to practice their religion, like Leah Sharibu, and also go to school. And not just young girls, but all other women and Christians, especially knowing that for Nigeria, it is the worst place for a Christian persecution on earth. And so we are using our voices to speak out locally at the grassroots, engaging governments, and also telling them and pressuring them by using, brave steps, either through protest, demonstration, or marches, to tell them what you are doing is wrong when people are being killed in so many villages, in so many communities. And apart from being killed, our girls are being stolen, our women are being stolen, and they are, raped and made sex slaves by the bandits and by the Fulani headsmen, militia, by the Boko Haram, who, Boko Haram literally means education forbidden. And so we do those protests. And apart from that, we also make sure that we empower these women, not just with education, but those that are not able to go to school, we give them for those that have gone through different forms of captivity, it could be a prostitution out of the poverty that they found themselves, their husband being killed and all that. We give them the opportunity to have skills and then biblical discipleship so that they will be very grounded in their faith and so on. And also we have some programs that we also use agriculture, which is farming and either husbandry, called the Sandy Helpers, Hope and Freedom Centers, Masada, and all that, just so that we are able to reach out and help women. For me, I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity that we have had at this summit. Nigeria had features frequently in almost every discussion. So thank you very much for that opportunity.
Can I add something to
Yeah, briefly.
I just want to say that what's happening in Nigeria, and for you as a Christian woman to advocate for Christians, it shouldn't just be you. We as Muslims, people of other faith, need to advocate for them as well. And that has been something that has been lost in a lot of translation. I say that as a Muslim because this is such a huge part of my faith. If we look back on the traditions of our Prophet Muhammad, he was so adamant about religious freedom from law to down to the grassroots on the people. It shouldn't just be you doing that work. I should be helping you. So when I train Catholic nuns in Nigeria in advocating for themselves, I have a lot of people asking me, like, why are you training Catholic nuns to advocate for themselves? And I say it's because that's what God expects from me. My spiritual connection to him is tied to making sure that everyone can...
This is wonderful to hear, and that's why we are sitting here and talking. We are organizing a conference in May, bringing the Christian women and the Muslim women so that we will be able to push and speak together, that we need to advocate for each other. And so thank you so much.
Let me add to that, too. Men, you are not off the hook. We need you. We need you. We need to walk together. This is not where we have failed. A little bit of intel in my mind with all this research. We made it too much about us and them. Think about the women's issue as another minority issue, as you would ethnic or another religion. Some of the best work on the ground is being led by men who have the voice and authority and recognize and honor women. So please, men. Okay, we're going to end this panel. You've heard of like speed dating. This is called speed panel conclusion, all right? Each one of you, all right? 30 seconds. 30 seconds. What would you ask the audience to do to engage, to help on this issue? 30 seconds.
Well, first of all, thank you. I want to thank you for your work. What you can do with us is work together with us across lines, across faith lines, across ethnicity lines, and certainly across gender lines. It's men and women, all of us together working. Grassroots, those of us who have government access, that's the key word. If you have access, if you can open the door, let us walk through the door and sit at the table. Not lean in, but sit down.
Haranessa.
I would say that there's so much talent, wisdom, and intellectual access here in this room. Become a mentor. Teach what you know. Get people who are from a different faith into your circle. Take them into the things that you're doing. Teach them so that we're not constantly repeating this cycle when we're 70, 80 years old that, oh, we need to like do this multi-faith work and the peace-building work that we're doing and promoting religious freedom when we don't have people who have been with us and we're not mentoring people. That's what's been lacking because we see an influx and then a drop, an influx and a drop. So mentorship, definitely.
Thank you. Gloria.
Yes, so on behalf of all of us that came from Nigeria, I want to request each and every one of you, over 40 countries seated here, to speak on behalf of Nigeria, that Nigeria should be placed back on the list of CPC, because it will be so helpful for us to have our government being pressured so that the persecution and all the violence that is happening are not just affecting only the Christians, but affecting our Muslims, women, and men as well to be stopped. So please put your voices together and let's pressure the United States government. And thank you, the UK, EU, each person that has been speaking, but we ask you to please help us add to our voices. Thank you.
Wei.
Oh, your mic's off today.
I'm not, hello, can you hear me?
No. Can you hear? Can you hold it up? He's got you.
Oh.
Okay, good.
There we go. 30 seconds.
Thank you.
She's rolling her eyes at me.
Persecutions against one ethnic minority or one minority groups is persecutions against all religious minorities. And therefore, please show solidarity to each other, among each other. Please stand with other faiths and other communities. And please don't forget Burma. We need your support. We need your help and your solidarity. Thank you very much.
And Lou, thank you for the work that you do. Continue doing what you do because it keeps going to the forefront. It documents it. And unless we have the documentation, nobody knows. So thank you for the work you do.
And I have an ask. Can the moderator put an ask? Can we get some more funding into FORB? Not just women, not just pet projects. Around the world, the number one thing we heard from 500 organizations, big and small, is men and women, is teach us to fish. Where's the money? We can't work with a little bit. So in closing, I'd like to add this thought. We had 25 minutes. My prayer, our hope, is that you are convicted, that you will see that there is significant potential to champion this. We can work on prevention, we can work on participation, we can work on protection, and we can work on justice for women and for it. Would you join me in thanking our panel?
Thank you.
Congratulations to the IRF Summit and partners for convening this important conference. Today, there is widespread concern for true religious freedom and freedom of thought around the world. The world is moving dangerously toward nationalism, communism, and totalitarian regimes, which all threaten true religious freedom. The Washington Times Foundation stands in full support of the leadership of Ambassador Sam Brownback and Dr. Katrina Lantos Sweat and all the IRF Summit partners in the global effort to defend, support, and advance religious freedom for all. The Washington Times has brought great attention to this important cause. We are joined with you in this effort as we work to reinforce three fundamental values: freedom, family, and faith. Together with the Universal Peace Federation, which has a global foundation in 172 countries, with support from heads of state, prime ministers, scholars, parliamentarians, and religious leaders of all faiths, we convened several conferences and forums in 2022 to help educate global leaders about threats to religious freedom. These two premier sponsors are fully committed to engage our global coalition in this effort to stand for religious freedom, which is the bedrock of all freedoms. Indeed, it is the basis of all human rights, which come from God alone. It is a universally shared value of all faiths and people of conscience. Let us work together to achieve lasting religious freedom throughout the world.
Please welcome our next panel. Countering the Global Surge of Anti-Semitism, IRF Co-Chair Katrina Lantos Sweat, Deputy Special Envoy to Monitor and Combat Anti-Semitism, Aaron Kiyak, and the Managing Director, Policy and Political Affairs, American Jewish Committee, Julie Raymond.
Good morning. I want to start by thanking all of you for being here and for opening up this time to talk about the issue of anti-Semitism. It's not lost on anyone in the Jewish community that we have allies that are willing to hear about the various ways that anti-Semitism manifests, especially now after the terrible attacks against Israel by Hamas on October 7th, and the myriad repercussions. Anti-Semitism and international religious freedom have always had intersections, whether it's about the potential banning of circumcision or kosher slaughter, or the creation of a hostile environment that makes Jews feel like they have to hide their identities or not attend Jewish institutions, or moments like this where there are violent reverberations of hate, not just in the United States, but around the world. Dr. Lantos Sweat, I want to start with you. As the daughter of Holocaust survivors, what is your reaction when people are saying, as they're saying now, that never again is now?
Well, thank you, Julie, and thank you to all of you who are here for this incredibly important conversation. You've already heard me say a few times over the last couple of days that I am very proud to be the daughter of 2 Holocaust survivors. And I think of myself as kind of a link in a chain that goes back thousands of years to Abraham. And when I think about that chain and think about the history of the persecution of the Jewish people, it's sort of an extraordinary sort of list of tragedies that we can think about. The Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Romans, pogroms, diaspora, the Inquisition. I could go on and on.
The list goes on and on, yes.
The list goes on and on, culminating, of course, in the unimaginable horror of the Holocaust. But the fact is that after the Holocaust, many of us thought, we dared to hope, dared to believe that somehow the poison had been overcome, that this most ancient, most persistent, most inexplicable of hatreds had somehow been vanquished. And I think there is no doubt about the fact that after October 7th, the ground has shifted. The mask was pulled off. We know there can be no equivocation, no contextualizing, no effort to minimize the impact of what happened. But what I want to say to this community in particular, if I may, is that you need to think about the response to anti-Semitism in the context of religious freedom as underscoring that the Jewish people, perhaps more than any other I can think of, have demonstrated what it means in the face of all those lists of tribulations that I just went through, what it means to be determined not to be forced to give up your convictions, not to be forced to break your covenant relationship with your understanding of deity. They have sort of embodied it. And in that sense, the story of the Jewish people is the ultimate story for all religious freedom advocates about what it means to be determined, to be versatile, to be unyielding in the face of all this. Now, in response to your specific question, never again is now, I also kind of want to put it in that larger context. This, in my view, is a civilizational battle. If we can kind of say that the story of the Jewish people is the story of a small, often stateless, always persecuted community determined to keep their convictions, determined to hold on to their faith, then we can also say, as many have said before me, that what happens to the Jewish people is a canary in the coal mine. And this battle against anti-Semitism truly is a civilizational battle. If we are not prepared to stand in an unyielding and ultimately triumphant way against this new manifestation of evil, we will have lost our civilization.
I think that's such an interesting framing, because The reverberations around the world are being felt so acutely. AJC does an annual survey of anti-Semitism, and particularly of American Jews and their perceptions. And one of the things that we discovered, because our survey was in the field right after October 7th, is that American Jews, 78% of them, feel less safe as American Jews because of what happened in Israel. So this idea that what happens in Israel doesn't just stay in Israel, I think is acutely felt. And Aaron, I'd love your perspective as someone who, through the State Department Special Envoy Office, is traveling around the world and meeting with Jewish communities. What are you hearing from them?
Yeah, I mean, we live in a time right now where Jews everywhere feel less safe. And what we saw with the terrorist attacks on October 7th was horrific. And as a office headed by a Holocaust historian who's an expert in denial, what we saw on October 7th was the denial in real time of these atrocities. We saw these atrocities being live streamed, and yet too many in the world denied it. What we see in the United States and around the world is that under the guise of criticizing the Israeli government and how they're executing its war on Hamas, anti-Semites throughout the world are using that flag to engage in their anti-Semitism. And what we know is when you blame Jews or hold Jews accountable for actions of the Israeli government in Jerusalem, or, by the way, for any government, that's anti-Semitic. In front of my synagogue in downtown Washington, D.C., we have anti-Israel protests, and that's a choice. There are plenty of legitimate targets for criticizing Israel and protesting and exercising your right to protest and free speech. Of course, the Israeli embassy, my office. You can sit in front of the State Department, which happens quite often in protests, but to choose a religious institution and blame Jews for the decisions of the Israeli government, that's a choice. I mean, it would be absurd. It wouldn't even compute to go in front of a Chinese restaurant to protest the actions of the PRC because you disagree with how they're treating the Uyghurs. But yet it feels so comfortable throughout the world, including, unfortunately, here in America and specifically in Washington, to blame Jews, to attack Jews, to target Jews because of the actions of a foreign government. And we have to think about how, you were talking about how old anti-Semitism is. It's often known as the oldest hatred. And it's so comfortable, it just simmers under the surface in society, and then you see something like October 7th or any other event that gives anti-Semites the opportunity to practice their hate. In addition to the denial, what we know from these atrocities is you can't commit such atrocities as those that were committed on October 7th while maintaining the humanness of the victim. The dignity, the uniqueness of the victim, and so that
the value of human life.
And so it starts with dehumanization, right? And we know that from all of our work in fighting for international religious freedom, that the first step is not the gas chambers or the atrocities we saw on October 7th or mass imprisonment. It starts with words. It starts with looking to that human in front of you. And just not seeing a human, seeing somebody, seeing another, seeing an it, seeing a them, an animal.
I loved what Dr. Lantos Sweat said about resilience and the ability of the Jewish people again and again and again to stand up and say, no, we're here, darn it, we're staying. But unfortunately, I feel like, yes, that is the long game. That is the overarching message. But in this moment, there are a lot of Jews who are making choices to not stand up proudly, but rather to hide, to not go to the synagogue that's being protested. I'll say in my own family, my children are of the age where they would start Hebrew school. And my husband said, let's wait a year. For exactly that reason. And the AJC's survey that I mentioned before found, and we're going to release all of this data in just a few weeks. I'm just giving little snippets. 46% of Americans who are Jewish are changing their actions in some way right? Whether it's not wearing a kippah or yarmulke, as Aaron is today, or not having a mezuzah on their doorpost, not attending a synagogue. And that, I think, is really troubling. And Dr. Lantos-Sweat, I would ask you, because you really see this broad scope of international religious freedom, how do you come back from that?
Well, it's something that I have, of course, observed very close to home, actually. So my mother, Hungarian, survived the Holocaust and experienced what it meant when a country where her family had been very assimilated and, very affluent and successful, experienced what it meant when her countrymen turned against her. But it was quite interesting, and again, I'll tell a story and then try to answer the question. Some months ago, this was before October 7th, I had a beautiful mezuzah that had sort of been sitting in a drawer, and I'd been meaning to put it up. And for those of you who don't know, a mezuzah is a beautiful sort of a little scroll, a scroll of scripture in a case, a metal case,
box.
a little box that you put outside your door. And Aaron probably could explain better for me the full meaning of it.
No, that was great.
But I'd been meaning to put it up, and finally got my husband to do it, and it was made me so happy, something to touch when you come in the door. And I brought my mother to see it. She's 92 years old, 92 and a half now, but still very vibrant. And I was shocked by her initial reaction. She said, "Oh, honey, is it safe to put it outside the door?" In Hungary, we had, of course, the mezuzah, but we only had it inside our apartment, not outside where anyone could see it. And at the time I said to her, Mom, you've lived in America now for how many decades? It's fine. It's fine. Of course it's okay to have it outside the door. But then another quick example. After 10/7, the first thing I did was I ordered an Israeli flag. I have a 3-part flagpole at my home. American flag is always on top, and then other flags below if we have visitors from another country, or we have the New Hampshire state flag. And I put up an Israeli flag. Well, after the invasion of Ukraine, I remember in my little community in New Hampshire, you couldn't go 2 or 3 houses without either seeing a Ukrainian flag, or somebody had wrapped their mailbox in yellow and blue, or they had a sign up, we stand with Ukraine. And it was wonderful, and we, of course, had a Ukrainian flag up as well. I've driven my whole town, and mine is the only Israeli flag.
Wow.
Which I find, of course, there are a lot of Jewish people just in my neighborhood, but I think it speaks to what you're talking about. And I think the way you come back from that, and I am certainly starting to see it, and that's what we see from community after community after community here at the IRF Summit, whether it's the Ahmadi Muslims, whether it's the Baha'is, whether it's, Christians in Nigeria or in India. You find your backbone. You find your courage. You think about those who came before. You think about sacrifices that have been made. You think about what I referred to as the unbroken chain, and you stand up. You do not hide. My mother got for every single one of the daughters in her family a beautiful bracelet, which I have not taken off, with the Star of David. And I started wearing my Mogen Davids more than I usually did. After 10/7, you show who you are. And if you're not Jewish, you're not a persecuted Christian in Nigeria, you're not a member of the Ahmadi or some other community, you find out how you can stand with them. And one of the things that this summit is about is standing up with each other.
Yeah, and I suspect part of that is because somehow standing with the Jewish community, even though they're the victims of religious persecution and the worst murder of Jews since the Holocaust, is somehow controversial.
Yeah.
Right? When it fits so easily when we're talking about Ukraine or we're talking about Boko Haram. What we saw with the atrocities on October 7th, and my boss, Ambassador Lipstadt, and our ambassador in Geneva, Ambassador Michelle Taylor, wrote an op-ed in The Guardian just recently about this subject. There were mass atrocities, and specifically with gender-based violence. And for some reason, when we say we stand with women or believe the women, somehow there's but except for when it's Jews.
Yeah.
And what we saw in the aftermath of other such gender-based mass instances of gender-based violence is understandably sports stars, government leaders throughout the world, media figures standing with those victims, as is correct. But somehow, when the victims are Jewish, there's this idea that maybe it's controversial. You know, maybe they brought it upon themselves, which in the context of gender-based violence committed against any other group would be atrocious, would be unjust. But yet, there's a pause when it comes to this particular type of victim in this religion.
That is such a good point, and I want to give a shout out to the Danes. I lived for 3 years in Denmark, and some people say this story is maybe not 100% historically accurate, but it's the counterpoint to what you're talking about. When the Nazis occupied Denmark and ordered all the Jewish Danes to begin wearing the yellow star, what some history books record and others question whether it happened is that the next day the King of Denmark, on his usual sort of ride through the city, wore a yellow star. Solidarity, standing with the victims, it matters. It matters. And we honor it and are grateful for it when it happens.
What I love most about that in particular is the historicity of it aside, the Danes believe it to be true.
Yes.
And they are proud of it.
Yes.
And to this day, young Danes across the spectrum will tell that story with a great deal of pride.
Yeah. And they deserve to be proud. And you know, when you stand up for your Jewish friends and neighbors, for those Jewish girls raped and brutalized, you deserve to be proud too, especially if you are not of that heritage.
So we just have a few minutes left, and it strikes me that these are dark times for a lot of us. But this conversation is leading towards a place of great hope. And so I want to ask both of you in somewhat of a different way. Aaron, you travel the world. You see communities at their depths and at their brightest moments. What communities are giving you hope right now? Is there something you've seen since October 7th that you can point to and say, yes, that's how we get to the light? And then Dr. Lantos Sweat, I've heard you tell the story of your family surviving the Holocaust. And the most beautiful, poignant moment is when you talk about Raoul Wallenberg and how he saved them, and he saved so many. Who's the Raoul Wallenberg of today? Whether it's an individual or an institution or an idea. And does it exist? And you know, where's that light that we can look to today? Whoever wants to.
Well, just very quickly, one of the things that gives me a little bit of hope is when our office was created in 2004, we were the first special envoy on anti-Semitism. Now we have dozens of colleagues throughout the world within their own governments. And just really quickly, in the weeks after October 7th, we were able to rally dozens of representatives from other governments who are in this position to stand in solidarity with Israel. Maybe you should go take a look at the joint statement. Some governments might surprise you, but on this issue, when it comes to anti-Semitism, when it comes to religious persecution, when it comes to standing with the victims of such attacks, we were able to rally dozens and dozens of countries together through our colleagues throughout the world. So now we have people monitoring anti-Semitism within those governments.
Well, we are nearly out of time, and I can talk about Raoul Wallenberg at great length. He was this extraordinary Swedish humanitarian who came to Hungary at the height of the Hungarian Holocaust with one mission: to rescue Jews. My mother says they called him their Moses from the north. And I often say, and my sister Annette feels the same way, that one reason why we as daughters of Holocaust survivors didn't feel somehow quite the same burden of sadness and darkness that many other children of survivors feel is because a rescuer came into that darkness. A light shone in the darkness. And that was something that both of my parents clung to. And I do often say he didn't just helped to save their lives. He saved their faith in humanity. He saved their hope. He saved their sense of optimism. And I know there are other Wallenbergs. Some of them are sitting here today. We have had, for example, as part of this summit, some amazing Muslim women who have been leading the fight against anti-Semitism, who have put their own lives at risk by speaking out, by demanding freedom for the hostages. There are so many wonderful Muslims in particular, I want to say, because that's where people want to build the conflict.
Yes.
That's where they want to create the civilizational battle. And some of the bravest people I know, and it just so happens many of them are women, are these Muslim women who are standing in solidarity with their Jewish sisters, who are speaking truth. And so I don't know that I can say a single Wallenberg, but I see lots of lights out there, and it does give me great hope.
Thank you so much. And I would add to that that for me personally, you too are among my lights. Oh. And that this morning in this conversation, being here in front of this really important group adds just a little bit of spark in a dark time, and allows, I think, all of us to view the coming months and years with just a tiny bit more optimism.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
Welcome back, IRF Summit Co-Chair, Ambassador Sam Brownback.
Well, I hope it's been a great session for you. I know it has been for me, and an incredible summit. This is our last plenary session that we'll have. We'll have the other concurrent sessions this afternoon. We've got a great reception this evening at the U.S. Institute for Peace. You're going to want to go to that. It's just a fabulous space. And that's also kind of the time, really, for people to joyfully engage each other as we part. So Katrina and I have a few closing comments, and I think, Katrina, they've got you going first. And then I also want to bring out on the stage all the people that have put this on, and it's not very many, and they work really hard. So I want you to recognize them as well. Katrina?
Well, it's been an incredible experience, and you have been an incredible group to share this experience with. And Sam, I love Sam Brownback. Do you love Sam Brownback? I think everybody loves Sam Brownback. I think we just have to express that. And I can't say often enough how much of an inspirational figure I think he is for this movement, but he's much more than an inspirational figure. He is also sort of the juice behind this movement, and what a privilege it is for me to know him and work with him. Some years ago, I read a really interesting book, and one of the most intriguing things about this book is that it was an incomplete novel. So it only has about maybe 25, 30 pages, and it's both frustrating and kind of exciting because you really want to know what happens next, but it's up to you to figure it out. And the title of it was Mount Analog. And the premise of this little novelette was a group of explorers who believed a sort of legend, and there were kind of maps and this and that there was a mountain called Mount Analog. And if you could find this mountain and make your way to the top of it, it was the one point on Earth where heaven and earth met. Such a cool premise, right? And sadly, the novel ends much too soon because it is a story I would like to have somebody else finish writing. But I've never been able to get that idea out of my head. Is there a place on Earth where heaven and earth touch? If you think about it, of course, there are probably a lot of places on Earth. Not a mountain hidden on an island in the mists of the sea that can only be found if all the stars align and you manage to reach the shore. But all sorts of Mount Analogs in our world. And as I think about the people who make up this movement, this beautiful, incredible, inspired movement for religious freedom, I know that many of you are climbing that mountain or seeking to climb that mountain on a regular basis. You're trying to do God's will here on earth. You're trying to make a point where heaven and earth meet, where you are touching a life, rescuing a victim, speaking out boldly, organizing a community to try and let everyone reach their understanding of heaven while they're still here on earth. And I would have to say, Sam, thanks to you and thanks to the amazing team you're going to introduce in a minute, the IRF Summit is kind of a Mount analog as well. I feel that for these last 2 days, I've experienced a little bit of heaven as I see people loving and supporting each other, advocating for those with whom they share nothing in common, telling the untold stories that we desperately need to hear, lobbying the leaders of our government, making their voices heard. I think although we didn't have to go on a mysterious expedition, we didn't have to charter a ship, we didn't have to face the dangers of an unknown sea, we might have found Mount Analog here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You know, I was in Congress for a period of time, and we used to talk about often a week from hell. What we wanted to create for this week in Congress was a week from heaven, to build on your story. So the National Prayer Breakfast will come up tomorrow, this event, other events taking place, to really try to move forward beautiful things all around the world. And Katrina way too often talks about me and the things I'm doing, and I never get as much chance to talk about her and the things that she's doing. The Lantos Foundation, the Lantos team, they've been fantastic to work with. They do incredible work, an incredible job, and you're an incredible person. I worked with your dad, and you are really not a chip off the shoulder, you're building on his shoulders even higher. Let's give her a real big round of applause. She's great. And sorry that you had to put up with my scratchy voice all week, but I couldn't do anything else about it. Behind this stage here is a team of about 10 people that put this event on. This doesn't just happen. It is difficult. We've had 90 partners. We've had probably somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 people in total coming through here from all over the world. And they are working hard. And I want to call some of them out on stage now, if I could, starting with Peter Burns, who runs the overall operation for the year. Peter, come on out here. Way to go, champ. Great job. You want to say anything, Peter?
Thank you all. We really are honored to partner with you. We see this as a platform to get out the messages of our 90 partners that are so important in the critical work you do. So thank you for working with us. We hope to continue the effort with you. Thanks.
Good job. And Peter is just married. Been married less than a year. So, you know, this is busy time for him anyway. The person who puts the program and organizes all that together is Candace Bryan Abbey. Candace, I want you to come out.
She's also kind of my adopted daughter.
This is a hard program to put together because you just have so many moving parts to it and so many competing interests and so many stories that need to be told. And so to get that all to work together is really difficult. And Candace, hats off. You do a brilliant job. Somebody that does a lot of the social media is Chelsea Hedquist, and who works with Katrina all the time. And Chelsea, would you come out?
Okay.
And does a great job.
So this is a funny story. She is my actual daughter. They are soul sisters. They had no idea that they were wearing identical clothes today. So I think you need to give them a round of applause. They are the power twins. One is my biological daughter. One I've kind of claimed as my own.
I thought you guys planned this.
No, it was definitely not planned.
Wow.
And every woman out there knows just how shocked they were when they walked into the office today.
Next, I want to bring Manus Churchill, who's been Peter's assistant, and Manus has done just a fantastic job. First year with the event, you can see we don't hire anybody below 6'5", and just done a fabulous job working with us and got a deep heart for this, as all the people here do. And then finally, I want to bring out, well, two others I want to bring out. Matt Goddard is my personal person that works with me all the time, does a great job. And, we spend a lot of time together, and he does a great job of it. All the technology here, we didn't do. That's somebody else, and that's the next person, Cindy Nachman-Senders. Cindy, come out here and represent your team.
She does an amazing job.
There really is 6, 7 people behind here just putting this production on so that it looks really a good presentation to you and to people that we send it out to across the world. And they do a brilliant job of it, fabulous job. Let's give this team a real round of applause for getting things done. Just final comment. To me, the word for this summit, and it's a cumulative summit, as you've heard me say earlier. It isn't the 4th annual, it's the 4th cumulative. The movement has to keep building. And I used the analogy earlier that the first 3 were the jet going down the runway, building up speed, and this is the one where it takes off. The word for this summit is exponential. We have to have exponential growth in this topic and this work and the team that's out there. We have to get your advocacy groups networked into distribution groups. There's a number of churches and religious groups and synagogues that can take this message out, but they need to be connected to the advocates to distribute it and to be able to get people fired up in this grassroots movement. We've got to connect those things. It's got to be an exponential growth. I was flying back from Taiwan, where Katrina and I went to a summit there. Great work, but I was getting discouraged because I was thinking, we're doing 3 times as much as we ever have, and the problem is 10 times bigger. The problem's growing faster than the solution is growing. That means we've got to really ramp up what we're doing and get exponential growth in this, connecting these various parts, getting the various religious organizations and institutions that have this deep reach across the world connected to these advocacy nodes that can take that message out and magnify it and make it grow so that we can push back against this intolerable amount of religious persecution that's taking place in all corners of the world. We can do this, and we will win this fight, but we only win it as a team. It will not be won individually. It will not be won by one faith. If it's one faith or each faith standing on their own, we will fail. We'll be defeated. But together, and building the advocacies and these reaching organizations out, we can establish this fundamental cornerstone human right for everybody. And that's happening. And you're part of making it happen. You're the rudder moving this mighty ship. And the wind is in our sails. And we can do this. And we have to do this. The alternative is a despairing world that doesn't have faith and doesn't allow room for it. And doesn't allow the free soul to pick the choice of where they want to go. So as you go forth, you've got a mighty mission. You got a team behind you. And let's all pray together to move this forward, that these gates of religious freedom would open around the world. I love you all. I deeply appreciate you all. God bless you all.